The difference is the hapless victim is defined by their conditions. The strategic operator is informed by their conditions, and then they let their choices be what really drives the likelihood of the consequences that they are going to experience. Today, we want to answer the question, how do I improve my strategic thinking? This is a question that we get often, or it's a comment actually we see often on performance evaluations, where it's just like, hey, you're doing a great job, but you just need to be more strategic. And you're like, what the hell does that mean, right? And it's like, well, it's not being as tactical. And you're like, okay, I'm still asking you, what the hell does that mean? So if you're trying to develop somebody to be more strategic in their thinking, or you're trying to develop yourself to be more strategic in your thinking, I like to be able to have a scale to be able to kind of assess, like, well, where am I currently on a scale of my strategic thinking, and what would be clues that would help me take it up a notch or to the next level? And there's super deep ways and different components and modalities that we could talk about, but one of the methods that we've come up with is this notion of the 5 levels of a strategist. And so we've got a little model that we like to use when we're orienting to that, and that we use to kind of help develop our change agents and some of our clients as they're trying to also develop their strategic thinking, whatever that mysterious voodoo is. So let's take a closer look at that. The 5 levels of a strategist in our mind begins at a level where you're primarily focused on your conditions versus your choices. You're focused on your resources versus your resourcefulness. And at that lowest end of that evolutionary spectrum, you fall into the category that we call the hapless victim. A hapless victim is somebody who, they are a victim of their circumstances, right? It's like, well, the conditions weren't right, the market wasn't right, the team was bad, the customer was bad, the technology was bad, and that's why I'm facing adversity or challenges or difficulties. The advantage of being the hapless victim is that your ego is always protected. It's not your fault. It were unlucky, it was bad timing, bad conditions. So you get to walk around having a perfectly high opinion of yourself, but you're now buffered from the consequences of the choices that you're making. And I'm not saying that, none of us have ever been in that, but I mean, I've spent time the hapless victim within the last year myself. We all have days where we just get our teeth kicked in and gut punched and just, bad strokes of luck, bad streaks of moments. Yeah, there are bad conditions that face us. And there's moments where we got to kind of curl up in that fetal position, lick our wounds, and just kind of be like, woe is me, right? But we don't want to stay there for too long if you really want to be a strategic operator. So the next step up is what's called the blind activist. Now, the distinction here is the hapless victim will say, it's not even worth trying. There's no point in trying because it's not going to work, right? Or we don't have the resources, or we don't have the time, or we don't have the skills, we don't have the technology, we don't have the conditions, right? They will blame everything else around them. So there's no goal, no plan, no action. What the blind activist brings is at least action. They don't really have a goal, and they certainly don't have a plan, but they're like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, so I'm going to do something. And so this is where they just kind of just go, start taking random acts of something and to see what breaks loose. Now, it's not very efficient, it's not very effective, and it may actually be counterproductive, but what happens is if you're at least in movement, from a strategic perspective, now there's the opportunity for feedback. If you say it's impossible and it's not worth trying, you don't do anything, you just say it's going to be a waste of time, well, what you're guaranteed to do is just waste time, but you're not going to learn anything. The next day, you're going to be right where you are. A blind activist says, I don't know what we need to do, but we're going to do something. And they go out and they do something. They're like, oh, that wasn't right. They'll get some feedback, right? And they're going to start generating some momentum. So that's kind of the next level up that we like to describe. The third level is the focus doer. And so this is where somebody has a goal and they're taking action, right? So it's a little bit more directed. So they're like, wait a minute, what do I really want right now? What are my goals? What are my needs? What are my opportunities and my interests? And they're like, well, what I want to do is I want to have a better customer experience. I want to grow my business. I want to have more engaged employees. I want to have a better relationship with my wife. I want to be a better parent. Whatever that goal is, they have a goal, right? And they start doing stuff towards that goal. And again, this is very powerful. A lot of project managers fall into this boat, right? The scope is to give me a rock, and by golly, you're going to give me a rock. The downside to the focus doer is that they lack a plan. In that sense, right? They've got a goal and they're taking action, but they're just kind of throwing darts at that dartboard. So at least they can see the dartboard. That's an upgrade from the blind activist that just throws darts. But the challenge is that they're not thinking ahead, and so maybe they're just trying to chew a tunnel through the maze instead of actually work around through the maze. So it can be very inefficient. They can be caught by surprise. They can be stopped regularly by impediments that they didn't see coming. And then it's a lot of brute force and grit. And you can get it done, but it really drains a lot of energy, and it is very consuming of a leader's time. So the focus doer, a great step up, still not quite at the level of being the strategist. The efficient performer, they've got a goal, they're taking action, and they have a plan that connects those two. So they're starting to look a couple steps ahead, saying, wait a second, right? If I jig to the left and then stall for half a second and then I dart forward, I'm actually going to hit my goal a lot faster than taking the straight line approach. You know, mathematically, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Everywhere else in the world, the shortest path to success is almost never a straight line, right? You know, waters and rivers all follow curves and contours of their environment, and that's how it gets to its destination more efficiently. So they really step it up and scale it. So they've got plans, and they've even got contingency plans within those plans so that they can be more effective and efficient with their resources. The highest level of the strategist is someone who is looking out ahead, 2 steps ahead and 2 steps to either side. One of the key differentiators between a strategic operator and an efficient performer is strategic operators realize that to be strategic, it's not just about being efficient in how you reach a goal, but almost invariably, the more complex things they get, the more you're likely to see this. There's usually 2 or 3 or even 4 goals that you're trying to juggle, right? I'm trying to increase the customer experience while I'm being mindful of the budget, while we're improving the efficiency of our operations, while we're trying to engage in a new generation of leaders. So you've got trade-offs, right? I'm trying to promote the economy while we're protecting and preserving our natural resources. I'm trying to be able to enhance civil liberties while at the same time making sure that we guarantee access to certain services, right? So all of those things become potential trade-offs. So the strategic operator realizes it's not just a goal, there's multiple goals. And I'm trying to find the net balance between those. And that's a much more sophisticated way of looking at it. And their plans then accordingly are also more sophisticated in the sense of, you know, they've got contingency plans for the trade-offs of the goals. They also know that they're going to have to make some sacrifices in the plan that may not seem very efficient in the moment, but it's to be able to stage and be ready for when the time is right for that thing to happen. So strategic operators are building relationships, building bridges before they necessarily need them, because they know they can't predict exactly when that's going to happen, but they know now is the time to get it done so that it doesn't fall on the critical path later. So the strategic operator has a much broader and horizontal view of what's going on. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. All of these make mistakes. All of these have bad days. All of these face the same set of challenges and conditions. The difference is the hapless victim is defined by their conditions. The strategic operator is informed by their conditions, and then they let their choices be what really drives the likelihood of the consequences that they are going to experience. Now, a person, like I said, can go up and down this chain in a given day, right? You can be like, I start out the day and I am Neo from the Matrix, and I am a strategic operator and I can just see it all and I'm on it. And then I get clobbered by something along the way, and next thing I know, I'm on a focus doer and I'm just trying to get through that moment. And then maybe something really, really rough happens and man, I get sucked down to hapless victim for a bit. How we progress in each one of these is by asking ourselves slightly different questions. Let's say you've got a team member and you're like, man, I got me a wild hapless victim here. You can't just wave a magic wand and get him to be the strategic operator, right? And so the coaching questions you would ask a hapless victim are going to be a little different than the coaching questions you would ask an efficient performer to get to that next level. Let me give you a smattering of those and then we'll wrap this up. For the hapless victim, they're paralyzed by the risks, right? And their comment is, you know, it'll be a waste of time to do this because then it's guaranteed to fail. For a hapless victim, we got to talk about, since they're driven by risk, we can't talk about goals and aspirations and all this other nonsense. We got to stay in the language of risks. So what are the risks of not trying? What are the guaranteed outcomes if we don't do anything about this, right? Whether we're successful or not, like what is the alternative? What is the amount of pain that we're going to experience staying here? And when the pain of staying is significantly greater than the pain of taking a risk, right now you've got an opening, right? And then they're like, well, you're right, I want to stay here. So now they're like more likely to be a blind activist. Now, blind activist is running away from something, right? They're not running towards something. They're running away from this pain. So like, okay, we better do something, right? But just because we should do something doesn't mean anything is going to be better, right? We can't actually make things worse. So for a blind activist, when you start asking, like, okay, well, we're trying to avoid this pain, but what is the goal? What is the pleasure? What is the opportunity that we're also seeking so that we can start shifting from running from to running to? So coaching a blind activist has more to do with like, what do you seek? And leveraging one of those 6 fundamental human needs with those 6 whys, being, listening for the clues for the types of things they care about and tying it contextually to that moment, so that they're like, well, I think what I really want is an improved customer experience, or I want an improved bottom line, or I want to be able to have less stress in my life. And you're like, okay, well, if that's the goal, then let's really get clear on what that is so we can run towards it. The focus doer's got that goal that might be more unilateral. It's just a singular type of goal. And they're just kind of brute forcing. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you're working hard. How can you work smarter? What are the things that consume a lot of your time, but don't necessarily produce a lot of progress? So here we start looking at some time management techniques. Here we start looking at prioritization techniques. Here we start looking at understanding dependencies and timing of certain things that are more natural to happen at certain times of the day, or at certain points and certain economic cycles, or in certain conversations in a sales pipeline, for example. So the focus doer, you're looking at the hows in a much more detailed fashion to be able to coach them up. And a lot of us will how things to death and then never get to the point where we realize, well, actually we got to also evolve our whys and our goals. And that's where the efficient performer, to get them to the strategic operator, we start thinking like, okay, well, that's a great plan that optimizes it for this factor, but what are the 4 other political forces or economic forces or legal forces that we're dealing with right now that we're now might be having a trade-off? And what do we need to be doing now, even though it doesn't seem relevant and urgent, to prepare us strategically to be in a better position when the winds change, right? So yes, it's really efficient to paddle right now, but if we're going to upgrade to sails or to a motor later on down the road, what do we need to be doing to plant seeds now to be ready for those opportunities? Otherwise, you'll be like, oh, wait a second, I got really good with paddling, but then I got stuck with a paddle. So that's how you get that efficient performer to start evolving into the strategic operator. And the strategic operator, it's not like you just stay there, right? Any moment you can slip back. So, how do we reinforce this? What are the next relationships? What are the next causes? What are the next transformational efforts that we want to be preparing ourselves for the future? So those are some coaching questions to be able to help yourself bootstrap your strategic thinking, or maybe to help you develop and unleash the strategic thinking in an up and coming emerging leader in your organization. So the next time you see improve your strategic thinking, don't be so tactical, in your mind now you can decompose that into something that's more tangible and earmarked, and know some questions that you can do to influence your development at each stage. In the meantime, be well, stay unleashed. Thank you for plugging in today on this little bit of leadership candy.